In this lecture, you will learn about the fundamental terminology for statistics. Specifically, you will be able to distinguish between descriptive and inferential statistics, define the words population, sample, parameter, statistic, and variable as these terms are used in statistics, distinguish between quantitative and qualitative variables, and identify the lower and upper limits of a quantitative measurement. Statistics can be split into two basic categories, descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics consist of numbers which describe data. For example, the measures of central tendency, that is the mean, median, and mode of a data set are classified as descriptive statistics because they specifically describe one set of data. Inferential statistics involve using the characteristics of a known sample to infer conclusions about a larger similar population. The key idea for inferential statistics is that your goal is to make conclusions about a group for which you do not have comprehensive data. For example, if you wanted to investigate the effects of a reading intervention on third-grade students who tested unsatisfactory or partially proficient on a standardized test, you could use a representative sample of third-grade students to test the reading intervention. In theory, if the research process is followed with fidelity, the conclusions you come to for the representative sample could be generalized to the larger population of all third-grade students who tested unsatisfactory or partially proficient. Because you don't have to test each and every student, you save time and money and, quite frankly, testing the intervention on every student in these categories is unrealistic. Examples of inferential statistics which we will cover in this course include an analysis of variance test called ANOVA tests, t-tests, and chi-squared tests. Terminology we will use frequently throughout this course includes the words population, sample, parameter, statistic, and variable. An example of the population from the previous slide would be all third-grade students who tested unsatisfactory or partially proficient on a standardized reading test. The corresponding sample would be the smaller group of students who are demographically similar to the population on which the reading intervention is actually used. The terms parameter and statistic are used to describe the numbers associated with a population and sample, respectively. That is, populations are described by parameters, while samples are described by statistics. A handy way to remember this association is to notice that the pairs start with the same letter. The other thing about parameters and statistics is that they're expressed using different alphabets. Parameters use Greek letters, while statistics use Roman letters. If you want to discuss the arithmetic average or mean of a population, you use the Greek letter mu as the parameter, whereas the sample's mean is expressed using x with a bar over it, called x bar. If you're wondering why I used a picture of a kitten for the parameter illustration, it's because that's my kitten. Her name is Mew. More about that later in the course. Finally, we will use the term variable to describe anything we measure because we are interested in how it changes. In our running example about the third-grade students, a variable we measure would be the students' test scores. To see if the reading intervention affects students' scores, we would likely measure the students before and after the intervention on some sort of reading test. Then we'd explore how the scores changed. This diagram does an excellent job of showing how these key terms are related. If we want to make a conclusion about a large population, but don't have the resources to measure every individual, we can get a reasonably good guess about the characteristic of the population, such as the population mean, by taking a random sample of individuals from the population and determining the sample's mean x bar. Then, using tests of inference, we can make assumptions about the matching population parameter, in this case, the population mean mu. The thing that is hard for some folks to wrap their head around is we can't ever claim 100% certainty using inference that our results are accurate, because the entire point of using inference is that we cannot measure each individual in the population. We'll delve into the intricacies of tests of inferences in the second half of this course. Quantitative variables are variables whose levels indicate different amounts. In contrast, qualitative variables are variables whose levels are different kinds, not different amounts. For example, the standardized reading test score is a quantitative variable because the numerical value indicates different levels of reading ability. If we were interested in exploring the relationship of gender in our research design, that is, does the reading intervention work better for girls than for boys, the variable gender is qualitative. Even if we ascribe a value to each gender to make the recording of our data easy, such as male equals 0 and female equals 1, these numbers describe the different kinds of gender, not the different amount of gender. Other examples of quantitative variables may be GPA, height, weight, and age. Qualitative variables may be ethnicity, hair color, and zip code. When working with quantitative values, it is important to understand what the lower and upper limits for a particular reported score are. One way to visualize how to understand upper and lower limits and their importance in quantitative values is by thinking about the values on a continuous scale. Figure 1.1 shows the upper and lower limits of recall scores of 6, 7, and 8 in a quantitative memory test. If a person scored a 6.7, his score is actually reported as a 7 because the lower limit of the score lies at 6.5. What are the upper and lower limits of these scores? 5 meters of fabric, an IQ score of 103, SAT math score of 665. For the first example, the lower limit of the score is 4.5 and the upper limit is 5.5. In the IQ score example, the lower limit is 102.5 and the upper limit is 103.5. Finally, the lower limit of the SAT math score of 665 is 664.5 and the upper limit of the score is 665.5.